Hello, this is Chief Dino Scambolone of the Los Alamos Police Department. On November 13th of 2023, we held a town hall in council chambers regarding proposed animal ordinances related to our municipal code. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning of that presentation. Therefore, this is being re-recorded on the 14th so that we can add it to the online video. The purpose of the meeting was to receive public comment about the two draft ordinances. The first draft ordinance was Chapter 6, Animal Updates, which is the existing code. And then the second ordinance was a new code regarding wildlife feeding. Chapter 6 of the municipal code relates to animal control. Animal control and welfare are a division of the police department, and the Incorporated County of Los Alamos Municipal Code Chapter 6 governs the regulation and enforcement of animal-related activity. This issues surrounding animal welfare has been in front of council for the last few years. Council impaneled an ad hoc committee who provided the county with recommendations on best practices. Additionally, we recognized within the current code there were updates that needed to happen to comport with state law. We also recognized some enforcement challenges, and we also heard from a game and fish officer regarding the specific issue of feeding wildlife in the area and seeing an increased wildlife presence in the community. Council requested a draft ordinance of a wildlife feeding ordinance. Public comment, written public comments can be made online before December 7th by going to the county's website. Also in the presentation is a QR code which will take you directly to that area where you can submit your comments. We allowed for comment cards at the meeting itself, and we will continue to accept public comment again through December 7th. The ordinances will be introduced on November 28th at council, and then the public hearing will be December 12th. At that time, verbal public comments will be heard in council on the 12th during the public hearing.
On to the first ordinance, which is amending the current ordinance titled Incorporated County of Los Alamos Code Ordinance number 02-306. On page 2, the first suggested change is simply removing a requirement for control and custody of an animal for more than 6 days within the definition of keeper. The purpose for that is whoever has custody and control of an animal is responsible for the conduct and behavior of that animal, whether you bound it for 6 days or not. So that was removed. On page 3, we redacted current language under unreasonable animal noise prohibited. This is essentially the barking dog section. And we added language that we feel is better for us from an enforcement perspective, barking dogs are one of the most common complaints we get. The current language says continuous barking for 10 minutes, which is hard to, from an enforcement perspective, to take any action on. So we redacted that current language and added new information, new language for that section. In that same section on page 4, we redacted some language regarding penalties, and this is the part of the code that we require to be changed given updates at the state code level to be to ensure that our local ordinance comports with state law. The next suggestion is on page 4 under 617 unwanted animals. Simply changes the word will to may, except any. And again, in previous conversations on this topic with council, we have to be able to effectively manage our population from an animal welfare perspective. If an animal is brought in that let's say it was picked up in another jurisdiction, for example, the shelter manager has affirmed with council that he does what he can to ensure that animal is placed somewhere. This just changes the word will to may. Under 619 cruelty to animals, we added some language which could be viewed as a hoarding situation, but we didn't want to call it that, and we didn't want to put a certain number on it. It just says, regardless of how many animals you keep, you have to ensure that you provide for the necessary health and well-being of those animals. In section 6 on page 5, this is all new language specific to Ashley Pond, and it's called the Ashley Pond Wildlife Protected Area Designation, and it basically just says that other than a government official, it is unlawful to desert, abandon, introduce, or dispose of any animal, fish, bird, or reptile into the Ashley Pond Wildlife Protected Area. Also unlawful to remove, catch, injure, maim, or kill any animal at Ashley Pond. Same page, section 7, redemption of impounded animals. Just cleaned that up a little bit and denotes that reimbursement by the keeper for actual costs can be actual costs incurred by the county can be reimbursed. Section 8, we removed the fee schedule within the ordinance. Council still maintains the oversight and approval of any fees, but it'll be in a separate motion outside of the ordinance. So if and when this ordinance is approved, we will then file that up with a fee schedule, which I don't anticipate will have any changes on it. So it'll be the same fees that it's been for several years now. It just removes it from the ordinance, so it's more efficient. And the following 2 pages, pages 6 and 7, just go into further detail regarding impounding animals and adoption fees and such. Sterilization, unsterilized animals, etc. That is in whole the suggested recommended changes for that part of our ordinance. So with that, I guess we would open it up for any questions or concerns or comments or feedback that you might have on this before we move into the wildlife ordinance. So first, anybody here present, if you have a, yes, sir.
I have
Oh, I think we have a microphone so that people can hopefully hear it.
okay. I think that the wildlife protected designation is fine, but I talked to a gentleman who was in charge of the pond for the parks 4 or 5 years ago. And in the process, I was down there most days, which we'll come to. And what I've been doing, and back, I got the police involved once or twice, so I could get them out of the station house. About fishing. And he told me, oh, we've got the signs, we just can't put them up. And they haven't been back in 4 or 5 years. Signs, yeah. They did put up a couple of sticks with paper signs on them, but they had metal signs from what he told me long ago. And putting up a couple of signs would be really good, because the last time I talked to somebody this summer about fishing down on the pond, they said, oh, that's all right, we'll put them back. And, so some of that could be straightened out a little bit.
Okay. Any other concerns while you have the microphone?
No, that's all. You can take it away.
Okay.
Later.
Okay.
I guess one thing that I'm glad you do is you wait for people to bring their animals back to be sterilized. Because I did have 2 cats that I picked up, I think, at the Espanola shelter. And they were sterilized at 8 weeks. And those were gigantic cats. And I just figured it was because they had never gotten any hormones or anything. And so they just grew into these great big animals that were probably very unhealthy. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody in the audience tonight?
So fortunately, I don't have a problem now, but over the years, I've had a couple of times when there were dogs in the neighborhood that were barking incessantly and the owners were not present. And when I called, the police came and they said, well, we can't do anything, the owner isn't there. Is there some way to take care of that problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, probably one of our most consistent complaints is barking dog. And the way this current code reads, it literally says continuously barking for 10 minutes, which is unlikely from a legal perspective. So we wanted to clean that up. Again, with any enforcement that our animal control officers do, we're not heavy-handed. I believe my council report indicated over the last 3 or 4 years, we've written like 19 citations or something to that effect. So, and with any new change, we would be more focused on education, at least initially. But in order to have language that is enforceable, we needed to make a change in that specific area. And we think we did that with the change that you see of unreasonable. So we removed the continuous 10-minute barking reference.
So I experienced the continuous 10-minute barking. My neighbor at that time, well, he ended up being arrested for methamphetamine production. But he had gotten a dog because he knew that the people he sold his product to might break into his house. But then he would leave the house and go to White Rock to make more methamphetamines. And I was in the house with the dog outside. If you were called to a house where the dog was barking and you got there and the dog was still barking and nobody answered the door, what can you do about it?
So we have had that, this is all recent that we have a new kind of crew to animal control up here. The officers aren't new to the field, but us being established working together. So if in the history you've had officers respond and say, I can't get a hold of the owners, sorry, you know, we leave door notices. We'll contact the county to obtain phone numbers through there to try and contact the pet owners. We do follow-ups the next day to make contact with the pet owners, and we'll leave multiple door notices. And then we can reach out through letters as well and forward things to court if we can't get a hold of pet owners. Like, they can't just stay inside and listen to the barking forever. You know, we do follow-ups and leave notices for the owners. And the police department has really stepped up the last few years in helping us respond to the nightly barking calls. Since animal control, we work until 6:00 p.m. After a call, the police officers have been responding and working with us and sending us emails in the morning then to follow up if they were able to make contact at night, and then animal control follows up in the morning as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience tonight? Ian, online?
Any questions on this first ordinance? Please use the raise hand function. I don't see any hands, Chief.
Okay. We'll go into the wildlife ordinance. I don't know, it's just this one section, I guess, that what's page 2 look like? Yeah, so page 2. Essentially, for those of you that may have looked at when the game and fish officer came to council, they get a lot of calls, as do we, regarding this issue. And it was very informative session there at council, and talked about the reasons why municipalities have been considering these types of ordinances. Problems or issues that are created when wildlife is fed. And so this draft ordinance codifies that behavior, and basically to feed is to give, place, expose, deposit, distribute, or scatter any edible material which can be utilized for consumption by wild animals. As an exception for the legal baiting of fish. Does talk about waterfowl, and then specific to the prohibitions, no person shall purposely or knowingly feed or in any manner provide access to food for any wild animal and waterfowl within the corporate limits of the county, including publicly or privately owned land. Feeding of songbirds and other backyard birds, not including waterfowl, shall be permitted outdoors at such times and in such a manner that feeding does not create an unreasonable disturbance with wildlife. Any feed must be placed within a bird feeder with a maximum value of not more than 1 cubic foot, placed at least 4 feet above ground, and bird feeders are placed where wildlife other than songbirds and backyard birds are unable to eat from them and do not become an attractant for wild animals. That in essence is the proposed ordinance. I know from the comments we've already received, there is some concern about this, so let's just open it up for questions. How about yes, ma'am.
So before we get to the bird feeders, which I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of discussion, I just have a question. I've noticed when I've been to the pond, probably in the last 6 months to a year, that there's been an individual there that has a bag of bread and is feeding the ducks and the geese with the bread, which I understand is not the healthiest thing for them. They shouldn't be eating that. So is that monitored by animal control or the police department?
We've put out on our Facebook page recently that we've had duck situations and geese occurrences, more so within the last 2 years with Edna and Homer and all of that going on. We have put out on our Facebook page to try and reach out to the community not to feed bread. French fries was another one that was being fed to them, which causes just problems for their overall health, and try to encourage more what they could eat that was healthier for their diet. So that's about the gist that we have responded to. We have gotten calls. If we go out there and the individual's still out there, we'll speak with them and let them know it's discouraged to feed them that, but yeah.
I'm the individual with bag.
Oh, okay.
I admit that. I basically have stopped feeding bread. All right, I don't do it anymore. I used to feed a lot of bread to Homer. And I put Homer on the pond 20 years ago. And he's been eating bread the entire time. And he lived to be 19 and a half years old. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I won't say anything about it. But I don't feed bread anymore.
Okay.
All right. Now, the other thing I have to say is feed is very hard to define. I've got a bird feeder in my front yard. It holds about a cubic foot, maybe a little more. And if I fill it, it takes about an hour, maybe 2. And some big buck is coming over there and finishing it off in about 10 minutes. All right, it's gone. And I'm not going out there and chasing. The other thing is, of course, we have other problems, and that is that I have a bear. And every time I have barbecued ribs, put the ribs in the fat in a plastic bag and put it in the roll cart. And he comes over and opens that roll cart real quick. All right. Not only that, but the bear also tore a screen off my kitchen window, ducked into the house on the kitchen table, stole a couple of loaves of bread, took off. He hasn't been back, but feeding is a little hard to define, and I feel that maybe something a little simpler than what's there would be good.
One word about the carts, and I'm not over this issue, but I know that the design of the first round that we put out, I guess I would say wasn't ideal, and they've invested in a different type, which is better for the consumer as well as the truck itself when it empties the can. I understand there's a waiting list as well. We are aware of that. We're trying to get those out, excuse me, because we recognize the exact situation that you described. it's a work in progress. We have invested a lot of money and time into that, and we'll continue to do so, but there are gonna be delays in terms of the better design that we're seeking.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
They're smart, they figure out how to get into things.
I worked for the National Park Service in Rocky Mountain National Park.
You know,
One of my duties was to chase bears out of the campground at night. So, bears and I have been around for a while.
yes, sir. Any other questions in council? Yes, ma'am?
When I moved here, 50 years ago, the canyon behind my house had running water and a wonderful habitat for animals. And I believe all the canyons in town were similar. Now we have absolutely nothing for the animals. The canyons have been scoured by the runoff after the fire and because of the floods, and there's nothing for the animals to eat. So I do feel deer, and I feel like we burn the forest down. We are responsible. We have at least one deer herd in town. We may have two. And they've always been here in our environment that we moved into and burned down. And I feel like that's our responsibility. So, sorry, but that's just mentally how I feel about the wildlife.
Okay,
And I don't feed them bread or anything. They get Pangea grain that a horse would eat, and I think it's as healthy as they could get anywhere. But there's nowhere for them to go, except to our town right now. That's why they're here. They weren't ever here before the fire. At least I hardly ever saw a deer in town. But after the fires, we have at least 1 to 2 herds of deer.
thank you. Anyone else in council chambers? Yes, sir.
One little issue about the feeding of songbirds. Awful lot of the native birds population here, the different species, are ground feeders. They are not accustomed to being up off the ground, feeding in hanging trays or feeders of that sort. My partner and I feed both on hanging feeders, which we keep up high, much higher than 4 feet, because the deer and the bears can get up 6 feet or more. But we do also put feed on the ground. Now we have a big welded wire fence enclosure around it to keep the deer out, because I'm actually not going to pay to feed the deer. They eat all my bushes and trees and apples in my yard, so I don't need to give them expensive bird feed. They're doing fine. They look pretty darn healthy eating what they're eating. But I do think that's one small issue with the prohibition on feeding songbirds. As long as the deer or bears can't get to that, and actually we don't feed at all during the summer months because the bears just come into town then. So, the ground feeding birds is an issue that I think you guys might want to look into.
Thank you. Anyone else in council? Ian, online?
Is there anyone online who'd like to ask some questions about the wildlife ordinance, feeding ordinance?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Who's going to be in charge of enforcing the new ordinance? Animal control or the police?
Was the question who would enforce?
Animal control or police, yes.
Either either entity could enforce, but because it's animal related, the majority of the enforcement would fall to animal control officers.
Okay, second question is, are they gonna have the same authority as Game and Fish? Game and, Game and Fish, if they suspect something that, is the way I understand it, they can come on your property without a search warrant. Are the police or whoever enforces this gonna have the same authority?
Well, that question covers a broad area of conduct, but I would say that it has been our practice. We're certainly not in the business of violating people's rights. It's contrary to our mission statement, so that wouldn't be our course of action generally. And I would have to think of an extreme situation where I can assure you we're not going to violate rights. It's just hard to answer that question because it's a potentially broad conduct that you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else online who has questions? Okay.
Well, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Talk about ducks.
Yes, sir.
First of all, the ducks on the pond are not wildlife. They're domestic. All right, and as I read here, it doesn't seem to say anything about domestic animals and wildlife. But when I feed the ducks, and I've been feeding the ducks for over 20 years, and I remember one year that I didn't come down to feed the ducks for 5 days. So I've been feeding the ducks for 7,200 days.
Go ahead.
It makes me very happy. It makes my day. And it makes my day even better when there's some little kids down there that I can give food to and watch them feed the ducks. And when they actually do come down, you find out if they bring their own food, it's almost always bread. All right, and I'm not sure that the county employees would like to go around talking to some little 6-year-old girl and say, no, sweetheart, you can't feed bread to the ducks. All right, that isn't gonna happen, I bet you. And if it is, I think there's gonna be some parents who are gonna be pretty mad. I'm gonna keep feeding the ducks until at least December. And that's the highlight of my time and my day, so.
Understood. Thank you for the feedback.
I'd like to see the county council, focus on restoring the habitat for wildlife in our county instead of focusing on restrictions for the people that live here about the wildlife. I just feel like that's the job of the county council, to be taking our tax money and restoring wildlife habitat. That's what I'd like to see them do.
Thank you. Any counselors wish to make any statements?
Yeah, I'll just add that when we had the presentation from Game and Fish, I believe it was May or in late spring, one of the things that was pointed out is that when in feeding animals such as deer, one was a concern about what is being fed to them, that it's not their natural feeding source of food. But also that, having so many deer in town then attracts mountain lions. And in the springtime, there were several sightings of mountain lions and I think a killing of 1 or 2 dogs. And so that was one of their concerns that they raised to us. So essentially it had to do with improper diet, and then attracting other dangerous wildlife. So I just wanted to mention that.
I don't think the deer are going anywhere. This is the only place they have. There's nothing in the canyons for them. The canyons are scoured. So, we just have to learn to live with the 2 deer herds that are here.
Yes,
Some time ago, Bob Anderson lived next door to me, ran critter getters. And actually worked for the county in a number of places. And one of the things he kept track of very carefully was the number of mountain lions in the county. And at that time, there were 7 that he knew of. And so they're here. I'm sure that we don't have the same problem that they had up along I-25 north of here. They had some real problems with the mountain lions around. But we got bobcats, we got mountain lions, we got bears, and not to mention coyotes. I mean, I chase coyotes around the sidewalk on the pond with my cane. Yeah, so they're here, and we're gonna have to live with them.
thank you.
I agree.
Anybody else? Well, on behalf of the county, I appreciate your input and being here tonight and online. I would remind you all that there's still time to evaluate these ordinances and provide your feedback to council. Again, it'll be introduced at November 28th, council, with public hearing then on the, was it the 7th or 12th? It is the 12th, yeah, sorry. And right there is a QR code if you want to go right to the county site where you can leave your feedback, or just get on our site and navigate to the to that area, and you'll see it's very simple. And many people have already done that, so I'd like to thank those people that have submitted comments as well. Anything else for the good of the order? I'll help yourself to some cookies and lemonade back there. And again, thank you for coming.